So the first question that I want to ask is, why did you decide to, you've been a successful businessman, you're a successful athlete, you've been a two-term governor, why decide to run for governor now, or for president now of all times?
Well, I really think the country is in deep trouble. I think we're bankrupt. That's the bad news. I think the good news is that we can fix it, but we've got to have a resolve to balance the federal budget. And I happen to be running as a Libertarian right now because I think the Libertarian Party embraces the best of both parties. The notion that most people in this country are fiscally conservative and socially tolerant. And I think that that's really what the Libertarian Party embraces. So you got to be able to identify what the problems are. I think you've got to be able to identify what the solutions that go along with those problems are. And then I think you've got to have a resume to suggest that you'll doggedly pursue addressing those problems and the solutions that go along with them. I happen to think I've got them all, so here I am.
Thank you for that, sir. The next question I have is, you obviously were a lifelong, or at least professionally a lifelong Republican. You started out in the Republican primary process. Do you want to speak for a moment about why you decided to run as Libertarian instead of staying with the Republican primaries?
I really think that for the most part I'm delivering the same message as Ron Paul, and I think that it's that when the message of liberty and freedom is understood, I really think that it does identify what the problems are in this country. I think it identifies the solutions that go along with it. I don't think Ron Paul is going to win the Republican nomination. So when that comes to an end, where does this message go? Well, I'd like to be the person that carries this message forward because it is so important. And I think as human beings, when we hear the same message coming from a couple of different sources rather than just one, it resonates a little bit more. There's a better understanding of what's being said. So in the context of being a messenger, I'm hoping that I'm able to make the message more understood.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned liberty a few times, and it's an important part of your message. The funny thing about this year's primary process is a lot of candidates have been referring to President Reagan and his policies. He individually, though, was a pretty strong defender of liberty, and it seems like a lot of your counterparts, the Republican Party, are advocating policies that are a little stricter when it comes to civil liberties. Can you give us some of your opinions and some of your beliefs when it comes to civil liberties?
Well, I really would like to see repeal of the Patriot Act. I really would never have established the Department of Homeland Security. I think that it's terribly redundant. And if you take a look at civil liberties, a woman's right to choose, marriage equality, I think that it is a constitutionally guaranteed right. These are issues that come under the heading of civil liberties. The notion that government should not be concerning itself with decisions that you and I as individuals should be making, not the government. The ACLU issued a report card. ACLU, group dedicated to civil liberties, issued a report card on all the presidential candidates a couple of months ago. And Newt Gingrich had 4 liberty torches out of a possible 24. Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney had 0 liberty torches out of a possible 24. President Obama had 16 out of a possible 24. Ron Paul had 18 out of a possible 24. And I had 21 out of 24. I had the high score. So I'm proud of the fact that the American Civil Liberties Association acknowledged me as perhaps the best presidential candidate with regard to civil liberties and how that really equates to our daily lives.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I wanted to ask a couple of questions now. A quick follow-up on your previous point. Why do you think that the party that you had, the Republican Party, the party you belonged to for so long, why do you think that some of your counterparts believe in small government and yet still seem to have, fixation is too strong a word, but still seem to be bent on advocating lifestyle choices? And in other words, why do you think there's a contradiction between the notion of small government and yet wanting government to interfere in private matters?
Well, I think there is a contradiction there, and it's a contradiction that I've never been able to defend. And for me, changing parties, the Libertarian Party, really, it's coming out of the closet. I just think that the Libertarian Party embraces the best of both parties. I think that for the most part, Republicans have been known to be pretty good on the checkbook, although they're not so good right now of late. And I think that for the most part, Democrats are pretty good when it comes to civil liberties, but of late, not so good. So how about taking the Libertarian Party, which is good, period, in both of those categories, balancing the checkbook and civil liberties.
Thank you. Next question I have goes to some of your economic and tax policies. You said that a lot of your counterparts in both parties seem intent on cutting spending locally while expanding or increasing spending internationally. How would you reallocate funds, and how would you plan to reduce taxes and reduce the deficit?
Well, I'm making three promises as President of the United States. First promise, I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now, that's not promising a balanced budget because Congress is going to have to go along with it. But I'm going to submit a document that is going to detail a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending now, which essentially eliminates the deficit. I'm also promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue. So I will essentially be vetoing everything. Even if Congress overrides the veto, which they will end up having to do, I suggest to you that in that scenario, spending will be less than any other scenario that you could possibly come up with. Last, I am promising to advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system. Income tax, corporate tax, tax withholdings from your payroll check, the IRS, and replace it with the fair tax, which is a consumption tax, which ends up to be cost neutral over a very short amount of time. It's really the answer when it comes to making American goods and services competitive for export. It's the answer to China, and it's really the answer when it comes to jobs, because if in a zero corporate tax rate environment, the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know under what circumstance the private sector will create tens of millions of jobs. I think the fair tax reboots the American economy for the next 100 years. And I say 100 years because politicians will get around to screwing it up somehow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Can you tell me where you stand on net neutrality and the government's role concerning the Internet?
There is nothing I want to see the government fix when it comes to the Internet. When you hear talk of net neutrality, you hear talk about equal access to the Internet, when the reality, I think, will probably end up being the opposite. So, government doesn't need to fix a thing on the Internet.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's move on to the war on drugs. Now, you're known as being a pretty clean-living person. You're an athlete and a triathlete, I believe. But you, I believe, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you believe in decriminalization of marijuana. And how do you feel about it? How do you feel about decriminalization of marijuana, and how do you feel about the war on drugs overall?
Well, I support legalizing marijuana. Let's control it. Let's regulate it. Let's tax it. We can't continue to arrest 900,000 people a year on marijuana-related charges. 50% of Americans right now support legalizing marijuana. The number has never been that high. The reason that the number is that high is that people are talking about this issue. And that's terrific. The more people talk about it, the more people come to recognize that, look, it's never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car, or do harm to others. But smoking pot, doing no harm to anyone arguably other than yourself, should that be criminal? No, I don't think that should be criminal. I think it's interesting that Colorado has a ballot initiative that I think has a really good chance of passing this November. The initiative is called Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, and I think that makes a whole lot of sense.
Thank you, sir. A couple quick follow-ups on that. I believe California last year decriminalized anybody who was caught with, or anybody who was found to have trace amounts or small amounts. Do you think that a large state like that is a sign of things to come nationwide, or do you think because they're in what is considered a more liberal part of the country that will stay sort of isolated to places like in the West, like Colorado and California?
No, I don't. I think when one state votes to legalize marijuana, that will be the domino where all the other states follow. My understanding is that New York State, when it came to the prohibition of alcohol, told the federal government, we are no longer going to enforce the prohibition of alcohol in the state of New York, that was the domino that fell and brought about repeal of alcohol prohibition.
Thank you. And one final follow-up on that. Do you think that part of the problem with the war on drugs is it's been defined as either you stand with us or against it? Do you think that perhaps we've been too finite? In other words, a person not being able to disagree without sounding like they were a pro-drug user or something?
Well, I think that has been the case, but for the first time, 50% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. This is a number that's moving up and not down, and the reason is that there are a lot of really great conversations occurring at millions of dinner tables, family dinner tables every night that weren't occurring before. So the more people that talk about this issue, the better this issue is.
I want to move to a few foreign policy questions. We had spoken just briefly before about you wanting to decrease spending overseas while allocating to smarter places domestically. Obviously, we're against Afghanistan and the Iraq War. How would you, if you were the commander-in-chief, how would you restructure the military? Would you keep it the same as it was? Would you bring the draft back? Would you have a larger or smaller military?
Well, a much smaller military. My first promise as President of the United States, submitting a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I think the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're bankrupt, that we're printing money to cover our obligation. So in my balanced budget will be a 43% reduction in military spending. How does that work out? Well, it's reducing nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. It's reducing our military footprint on the planet. The bases that we have, those that are in uniform in foreign countries, Europe, Japan, South Korea. It's the military in uniform. It's the civilian staff, civilian support staff that goes along with those in uniform. It's intelligence, it's research and development, and it's extricating ourselves from the conflicts that we're currently engaged in. If you cut back military spending by 43%, we're going back to the year 2003 to see those levels of funding.
A lot of people would probably ask you, doesn't a tremendous portion of our military spending actually go to government contracts, not necessarily to the men and women? I think a lot of times when you hear of cutting money from the military, you're worried about affecting the soldiers on the ground, but probably a quite high portion of that money actually goes to larger government contracts, I would assume.
Well, it's the balance of all of that. And like I laid out earlier, to reduce military spending by 43%, we are looking in these 7 different categories that I just pointed out.
So the next question I had for you, thank you, is, the next question I had was about the Fed. You've talked a bit about more visibility or more, pardon me, I lost my train of thought for a second. You talked about basically the Fed being more responsible, basically us holding the shining light on them and ask them to be more compliant with us. What would you, if you were the president, what would you ask of the Fed? What would you think the Fed's role in our government should be?
Well, I would abolish the Federal Reserve if given the opportunity. What that would accomplish is to bring transparency to monetary policy, something that's not taking place now. So I fully support auditing the Federal Reserve. I'd like to see a competitive environment for interest rates. Interest rates clearly would not be at zero if interest rates were in fact competitive. The real key is to stop printing money. Abolishing the Federal Reserve would not stop the federal government, would not stop Treasury from printing money. And that's what we need to do. So really the key when it comes to monetary policy is to slash government spending, to balance the budget now. That's really the only way to save our country from what I think is going to be a collapse. And that collapse will be a monetary collapse where our dollars won't be worth a thing.
You had mentioned you believe in competition among schools. You think that there should be competition, that our public school systems are failing. Could you tell us a little about your beliefs on public school versus charter schools?
Well, I, as governor of New Mexico, arguably was more outspoken than any governor in the country in support of bringing competition to public education, school choice. That said, what's the number one thing that the federal government could do to improve education in this country? I'm going to argue that would be to abolish the Federal Department of Education. Established in 1979, the Federal Department of Education gives each state about 11 cents out of every school dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached. So what I think the average American does not understand is that it's really a negative to take federal money for education. Get government out of the educational business, established in 1979, give it to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and I think that's exactly what you'll see. I think you'll see some fabulous success that will get emulated. I think you're going to see some really miserable failure that will get avoided, and it'll get avoided and emulated because we're very competitive. But that's how we're going to improve education in this country, is let's put it up for competition among 50 states.
Thank you, sir. You just talked about states' rights briefly a second ago. You were talking briefly in an interview I saw recently about stem cell research and how the government funding should not be a part of it. Is that for moral reasons, or do you think just because it's private venture it could be more efficiently?
Yeah, that's strictly from a private venture standpoint. No, I think that we should be conducting stem cell research in all aspects of stem cell research. And I say that from the standpoint of, imagine if you were paraplegic with spinal cord injury. I would hope that government would support the ways in which I might actually get cured or be able to return to a normal lifestyle.
Thank you for that. Next question I have is, what do you think, if you had to look back, what do you think that your top achievement as the governor of New Mexico and as a business owner would have been?
You know, what I was really proud of was really addressing all the issues, A through Z. What I was really proud of was looking at issues first and politics last, and I think taxpayers were really well served with that philosophy. When politics doesn't enter into the equation, when you do things on the basis of best product, best service, lowest price, let's get government as efficient as it possibly can be. Let's get government out of creating us having to spend more time and more money complying with what government wants when it doesn't make any difference in our lives other than to create more time and more money to have to comply.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few follow-ups and then we'll be done. Next question I have is, we've talked about trimming the budget and being leaner and meaner. Is there a place in our government, either on state level or on a federal level, we should be spending more? Is there a way to restructure the government where, are there parts of government that actually need more funding?
None that I know of. None that I know of when currently we are spending 43% more money than what we're taking in. I would argue that I am not talking about tweaking the federal budget here. I am talking about slashing government spending. The result being saving this country. We will not escape the mathematics of continuing to borrow and print 43% more money than what we're taking in.
I appreciate that. Two final follow-ups. First is, people are going to watch this interview and the press that you're doing around the country. What's the one or two things that you want them to take away from as far as why they should vote for you? What are the one or two main things that people should think about when you're asking, why should I vote for Governor Johnson?
Well, I think the majority of people in this country consider themselves fiscally conservative and socially tolerant. I'm in that same category. I think that I am identifying the problems facing this country. I think I'm identifying the solutions that go along with those problems. And I think I've got the resume to suggest that I'm going to doggedly pursue those problems and the solutions that go along with the problem.
I appreciate that, so thank you. Last follow-up. Now, as you mentioned, it appears that Congressman Paul is not going to win the Republican nomination. He has a very rabid following, many of whom have similar ideals to yours. What would you say to them in the general election? Why should people who support, the millions who support Congressman Paul, support you in the general election?
Well, at the base of Ron Paul's support are people with brains. So I don't think I need to tell the Ron Paul supporters anything after Ron Paul ends up unsuccessful in his bid to get the Republican nomination. I hope he gets the Republican nomination. I supported Ron Paul in 2008. I gave him my endorsement when he asked for it. When I dropped out of the Republican primary, I asked everyone that was supporting me to support Dr. Paul. Look, Dr. Paul's a messenger, I'm a messenger. This is something really important. Without asking for Ron Paul support, where does Ron Paul support go? I think it goes to a messenger that is talking about a liberty and freedom agenda, a balanced checkbook that goes along with that, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. And one quick final, if I may. What was your greatest achievement? Mount Everest, the Ironman triathlon? If you had to say your greatest achievement as an athlete, what would it be?
Greatest achievement as an athlete?
Those are pretty impressive achievements.
I think my greatest achievement as an athlete is that I live my life. I live my life without a destination. That you gotta like the journey. That if you make your life a destination, you're bound to be disappointed. You got to enjoy what you do every single day and minute. And athletics has given that to me. So, example. The goal was to get to the top of Mount Everest, but knowing everything that can go wrong with getting to the top of Mount Everest, you really have to enjoy the process. You really have to enjoy being over in Nepal for 2 months, going up and down that mountain 6 times, hunkering down when the wind and the cold really gets blowing. And if you can't do that, you're never going to get to the top. And if you can't enjoy that, then what are you doing up there in the first place? But getting to the top, icing on the cake, Ironman triathlon. If you don't enjoy training, you're never going to enjoy the event. And if you enjoy training, look, does it really matter how the event turns out if you enjoy training and making you yourself the best that you can do?
Thank you, Mr. It's always a pleasure to talk to straight shirts, and thank you for spending a few minutes talking to us.
Thank you very much.